I fought my stepmother and her children to save my family's apartment after they tried to take it. My name is Jules. I'm 22. Before I tell you how I evicted my stepmother, her two useless kids, and saved my rent-controlled apartment, you need to understand what this place is. It's not just four walls. It's a 6-unit pre-war brownstone in Brooklyn. Old brick, worn steps, a building with history baked into it. My mom's best friend, Aunt Mags, owned it. She wasn't my aunt by blood, but she was everything else. An artist, loud in her love, soft when it mattered. When my mom died of cancer when I was 9, my dad, Leo, broke in ways I didn't understand at the time. Aunt Mags didn't hesitate. She moved us in. She lived in the top-floor apartment, a bright place filled with light and color. She painted murals directly onto the walls, oceans, flowers, faces, things that felt alive. She gave my dad and me the large garden apartment below, rent-free. She said, "Family doesn't pay rent." For a while, we were okay. Then my dad met Diane. And everything started to rot slowly. After Diane entered our lives, nothing changed all at once. That's how she worked. She didn't shout. She didn't slam doors. She smiled. She organized. She cleaned. At first, everyone said we were lucky. Diane cooked real dinners. She labeled shelves. She reminded my dad to pay bills on time. She talked about structure and doing things properly, like those words were spells. I was 12. She called me sweetie in front of people and you when no one was around. Aunt Mags noticed before I did. One afternoon, she came downstairs while Diane was reorganizing our kitchen. Every cabinet was open. Our things were in piles on the table. "Where's Jules' cereal?" Aunt Mags asked. Diane didn't look up. "Sugary junk. I threw it out." Aunt Mags smiled tightly. "You didn't ask." Diane laughed. "Oh, I didn't think I had to." That was the first time I saw Aunt Mag's jaw set like stone. My dad didn't notice. He was grateful. Grief makes you grateful for anyone who takes over. Soon, rules appeared. Shoes only in the hallway. No music after 8. No friends over unless approved. Diane had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Tyler and Emma. They were older than me and loud in ways I wasn't allowed to be. They spilled things. They broke things. Diane called them kids being kids. When I forgot to rinse a cup, Diane sighed like I had personally disappointed her. "Jules, we all have to pull our weight," she'd say. Pulling my weight meant chores. More chores. Then chores that somehow belonged to everyone but became mine. I cleaned the bathroom Tyler used. I folded Emma's laundry. I walked Diane's dog even though she insisted it was good responsibility. Aunt Mags started coming down more often. She'd knock, then step inside without waiting. "Hey kid," she'd say to me. "You eaten?" Sometimes I had. Sometimes I hadn't. She always knew which one it was. Diane hated that. "She undermines me," Diane told my dad one night, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Aunt Mags didn't argue. She did something worse. She started documenting. I didn't know that at the time. I just noticed her asking questions. "When did that rule start? Who decided that? Did your father agree?" Diane's smile got sharper. The building noticed too. Mrs. Alvarez on the 2nd floor stopped Diane in the stairwell once. "Why is the little one carrying all the bags?" she asked, eyeing me with concern. Diane laughed. "Oh, Jules likes to help." Mrs. Alvarez looked at me. I didn't smile. That was the year I learned how to disappear. I stayed quiet, useful, out of the way. And Diane mistook that for victory. She had no idea what kind of woman owned this building. And she had no idea what Aunt Mags was willing to do for family. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning right away. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to be sure. I'd spent most of my life being told I was wrong, dramatic, or confused. I needed facts, real ones. So I started paying attention. I watched how Diane moved through the building like she owned it. How she spoke to the tenants with a fake smile that never reached her eyes. How she would knock on doors without notice, pretending it was an inspection, then comment on people's furniture, their smells, their lives. Mr. Chen once told me she asked why he had so many books, like it was a problem. I also started keeping notes. Little things at first. Dates, times, Cody blasting music at 2 a.m. Brianna blocking the stairwell with ring lights. Diane taking cash rent from Mrs. Alvarez upstairs and not giving a receipt. I wrote it all down in a cheap notebook I hid under my mattress. At night, after my shifts at the cafe, I'd sit on the fire escape with my laptop and read. Tenant law, owner responsibilities, what a guardian could and couldn't do, what counted as illegal rent collection. Every page I read made my chest feel lighter, like someone was slowly loosening a knot I'd carried for years. I also found Aunt Mags's old folder. It was in a box labeled, art supplies, shoved behind paint cans in the basement. Inside were sketches, letters, and at the bottom, copies of legal documents. The deed, the will, everything, stamped and boring and beautiful. My name was there in black ink. Clear, undeniable. I cried right there on the cold basement floor. Not loud crying, just quiet tears that surprised me. For Aunt Mags, for my mom, for the girl I was when all this started. After that, I stopped being afraid of Diane. I started seeing her as what she was. Loud, entitled, and very bad at math. The tension in the apartment got worse. Diane could feel something had shifted. She started hovering, asking where I was going, who I was talking to. She complained to my dad that I was being secretive. One night, she cornered me in the hallway. "You've been distant," she said, arms crossed. "If there's a problem, you should communicate like an adult." I looked at her and realized something strange. She wasn't powerful, she was nervous. "I am communicating," I said. "Just not with you." That's when she started panicking. She sent texts about chores in all caps. She left passive-aggressive notes taped to my door. She even accused me of stealing money from the building fund, a fund that didn't exist. That was when I knew it was time. I called Mr. Chen. He invited me in, made tea, and listened without interrupting. When I showed him the documents, he adjusted his glasses and smiled. "Well," he said calmly, "this is going to be very straightforward." From that point on, things moved fast, even though it didn't feel like it day to day. Diane didn't back off, she doubled down. She started calling herself property manager in emails. She printed cheap business cards with the building's address on them. She told Brianna to stop calling me Jules and start calling me the help, like it was a joke. But it wasn't. One Saturday morning, she announced a mandatory tenant meeting. Mandatory, even though she had no right to call one. She slid notes under everyone's doors, full of fake professionalism and spelling mistakes. I went, mostly to listen. She stood in the hallway like she was on a stage. Cody leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirking. Brianna paced around filming reaction shots for her story. Diane talked about rising costs, about responsibility, about how young people these days didn't understand hard work. Then she dropped it. "Due to increased expenses," she said, "rent adjustments may be necessary in the coming months." You could feel the fear move through the group. Mrs. Gable's hand started shaking. Maria grabbed her son closer. Mr. Chen didn't react at all. He just looked at me and raised one eyebrow. I didn't say anything, not yet. After the meeting, Maria pulled me aside in the stairwell. "She can't do that, right?" she whispered. "No," I said, "she can't." That night, Mr. Chen knocked on my door. "It's time," he said. We spent hours at his kitchen table. He explained everything slowly, carefully, like he knew I was still unlearning years of being talked over. We went over eviction laws, notice requirements, documentation. We made a timeline. We made copies of everything. He never once raised his voice. He never rushed me. At the end, he looked at me and said, "You don't need to be brave. You just need to be consistent." The next morning, I posted the notice. It was simple, plain language, legal, addressed to Diane, Cody, and Brianna. Unauthorized occupants, illegal rent collection, violation of tenant quiet enjoyment. They had 30 days. Diane lost her mind. She screamed, she cried, she accused me of betrayal. She accused me of brainwashing the tenants. She told my father I was destroying the family. My dad came home early that day. He looked between us like a man watching two trains collide. "You could have talked to us," he said to me quietly. "I did," I said. "For years. You just didn't hear me." He didn't argue. He just sat down heavily, like the truth finally weighed something. The retaliation started immediately. Cody blasted music at all hours. Brianna staged loud photoshoots right outside my door. Diane stopped cleaning shared spaces on purpose, then blamed me for the mess. I documented everything. Dates, times, videos, witnesses. The tenants backed me up without hesitation. Maria wrote a statement. Mr. Chen drafted affidavits. Even Mrs. Gable dictated hers slowly, carefully, her voice steady. Diane tried one last trick. She went to housing court and filed paperwork claiming she was the rightful manager and that I was unstable. She attached screenshots of old texts where I apologized too much, where I sounded unsure, where I said, maybe I'm wrong. Mr. Chen laughed when he saw it. Apologies are not evidence of incompetence, he said. Court day came. Diane dressed like she was going to a business conference. She smiled too much. Her brother sat beside her, sweating. I wore a clean sweater and brought a folder. The judge didn't need much time. When the documents came out, when the illegal rent collection was explained, when the tenant statements were read, the mood changed. Diane stopped smiling. The eviction was granted. 30 days became 14. Outside the courthouse, Diane called me cruel. She said I'd regret this. She said no one would love me like family. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The building already had. After that meeting, the building felt different. Not loud, not dramatic, just awake. People started stopping me in the hallway. Mr. Chen asked if I'd eaten. Maria brought empanadas and told me, quietly, that if Diane tried anything again, she'd call her cousin who worked for the city. Mrs. Gable squeezed my hand and said, Mags would be proud, dear. Diane noticed the change immediately. She stopped smiling. The next few weeks were a slow, ugly game. Diane would leave notes on doors claiming inspections were happening. I posted official notices correcting her. She told Cody and Brianna to ignore me. I documented everything. Dates, times, photos, screenshots. Cody got louder. On purpose. Gaming streams at 2 a.m. Music shaking the walls. When Mr. Chen politely asked him to lower it, Cody laughed and said, talk to the landlord. So I did. I issued formal noise violations. In writing. Brianna cried on Instagram about being oppressed by a toxic household. Someone commented asking why she didn't just move. She deleted the post. Diane tried one last angle. My dad. He came home one night and knocked on my door. He looked older, smaller. Jules, he said, you don't have to do this like this. I leaned against the doorframe. Like what? Legal, cold. I swallowed. Dad, you let her work me for years. You let her take money that wasn't hers. You didn't stop Cody. You didn't protect me. He looked down. I know. I just didn't want another fight. I lived in one every day, I said softly. He didn't argue after that. The eviction notices were served on a rainy Thursday. Properly, legally, no yelling, just paper. Diane screamed anyway. She called me heartless, ungrateful, said I was destroying the family. Brianna sobbed and packed dramatically. Cody punched a wall and blamed everyone else. The tenants watched from their doors. No one stepped in. No one defended them. On move-out day, Diane tried to take the mural sketch again. Mrs. Gable stood in front of the door with her cane and said, that doesn't belong to you. Diane didn't argue. When the apartment finally emptied, it was quiet in a way I'd never known. No chaos. No walking on eggshells. I sat on the floor of the garden apartment that night and cried. Not because I was sad. Because I was free. The next weeks were about repair. Real repair. Fixing things Diane ignored. Repainting carefully around the murals. Writing clear house rules. Helping Mrs. Gable with her window. Teaching Maria's son how to use the old radiator knobs. The building breathed easier. Sometimes I think about my dad, in that small Jersey City apartment. About Cody learning what rent really costs. About Brianna realizing filters don't pay bills. I don't feel revenge. I feel done. Aunt Mags used to say a home knows who protects it. I think she was right. A few days after they left, I walked through their old rooms. Cody's room smelled like stale energy drinks and sweat. The walls were scarred where he'd thrown controllers. There were dents he never bothered to explain. I opened the window and let the cold air rush in. It felt like the room exhaled. Brianna's room was different. Too clean. Too staged. Ring light still in the corner. Half-empty makeup drawers. She'd taken the mirror but left behind fake lashes stuck to the desk. I gathered them and threw them away. No ceremony. Diane's room was the hardest. Not because I missed her. Because it held my dad's things too. His old sweaters. His books. A photo of my mom that somehow ended up on her dresser instead of his. I sat on the bed and held that photo for a long time. I remembered being 9, sitting on this same floor while Aunt Mags made soup and told me stories about the building like it was the old days. She said the walls remembered laughter. She said if you listened, you could hear it. That night, the building felt quiet but not empty. The first rent checks after everything settled came directly to me. Mr. Chen helped me open a proper account. I issued receipts. Everything clean. Everything fair. I didn't raise a single rent. Maria cried when I told her. We started small changes. A real maintenance schedule. Clear quiet hours. A shared bulletin board instead of Diane's passive-aggressive notes. One evening, Mrs. Gable invited me up. She played an old recording of Aunt Mags talking about her art. Her voice crackled through the speaker, warm and teasing. She always believed you'd do this, Mrs. Gable said. She said you had steadier hands than anyone. That night, I moved my desk into the top-floor apartment. Sunlight poured in the next morning, just like it used to. I set up my laptop near the mural wall. I painted around the edges, careful not to change what was already there. Sometimes my dad texts, short messages, hope you're okay. I reply when I can. I'm not angry anymore, I'm just clear. The building has a rhythm now. Mr. Chen's kettle, Maria's son practicing piano, Mrs. Gable humming while she waters her plants. I still fix leaks, I still shovel snow, but now it's my choice. I don't feel powerful. I feel grounded. This place was never about ownership. It was about stewardship. And for the first time, the apartment is home again. Winter came quietly that year. The first snow fell overnight, soft and clean. I woke early, pulled on my boots, and went outside with a shovel. For the first time, no one had left me a note. No one expected me to do it. I did it because I wanted the steps to be safe. As I worked, lights flicked on one by one in the building. Mr. Chen waved from his window. Maria opened the door and handed me a cup of coffee wrapped in a towel so my hands wouldn't freeze. Mrs. Gable watched from upstairs, smiling. It didn't feel like work. In January, I finally went through Aunt Mags's old storage boxes. Sketchbooks, letters, half-finished ideas. In one envelope, I found a note with my name on it, written years ago. Jules. If you're reading this, then you stayed. Thank you. Remember, a home isn't something you own. It's something you protect. Don't let anyone rush you into becoming hard. Soft doesn't mean weak. I cried after that, the kind of crying that leaves you lighter. Spring came early. We planted herbs in the small yard. The roof garden plan became real. Just tomatoes, basil, and one stubborn rose bush Mrs. Gable insisted on. One afternoon, a couple knocked on the door asking about an empty unit. They were nervous. I saw myself in them. I told them the rules clearly. Quiet hours, respect, community. They smiled and said it sounded like a good place to live. Sometimes I still think about Diane, Cody, and Brianna. Mostly when something breaks and I fix it myself. They took a lot from me. But they didn't take this. At night, I sit by the window in the top-floor apartment and watch the streetlights flicker on. I design, I paint, I listen to the building settle. I am not loud, I am not flashy. But I am here. And the apartment knows it. One afternoon, not long after, a young woman stood on the stoop holding a cardboard box. She looked tired in the way people do when they've been carrying too much for too long. Hi, she said, I heard there might be a room opening up soon. I invited her inside. We sat at the kitchen table. She told me she worked nights at a hospital. Her last landlord sold the building. She needed something steady, quiet, safe. I showed her the guest room. Sunlight through the window, fresh paint, clean floors. What's the catch? She asked. There isn't one, I said. Pay on time, be kind, let people sleep. She laughed, small and relieved. I can do that. When she left, she stopped at the door. Thank you for explaining everything so clearly. No one ever does. After she was gone, I stood in the hallway and listened. The building felt warm. I thought about Aunt Mags. About my mom. About the girl I used to be. Sometimes help isn't loud. Sometimes it's just making space. I locked up, turned off the lights, and went upstairs, knowing the apartment would take care of her the way it once took care of me. A few weeks later, something small happened that stayed with me. The heat went out in 2B late at night. Not fully out, just enough that the radiators clicked inside without warming the room. I got the call while I was halfway through dinner. I grabbed my tools and went upstairs. Mrs. Alvarez, who had moved in years ago and rarely complained, stood wrapped in a sweater, embarrassed to have asked. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't want to bother you." "You didn't," I told her. "That's what I'm here for." It turned out to be a simple valve issue. 10 minutes of work. When the radiator finally warmed, she let out a long breath. She pressed a small bag into my hands. "Homemade cookies, still warm. For you," she said. "Because you listen." That word stayed with me. Listen. Later that night, I sat on the stairs and ate one cookie slowly. I thought about how different this felt from before. No fear, no resentment, just care moving back and forth. Not long after that, my dad came by. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment before ringing the bell. When I opened the door, he looked around like he was seeing the place for the first time. "I didn't realize how quiet it could be," he said. We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't ask to stay long. He just wanted to talk. He told me Jersey City felt crowded. That Diane was still angry. That he was tired. "I should have done better by you," he said finally. I nodded. "I know. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was honest." When he left, I didn't feel heavy. I felt steady. Summer came back around. The herbs on the roof grew wild. Neighbors shared food. We fixed a broken chair together and laughed about it. Sometimes, when I lock the front door at night, I rest my hand against the wood for a second. This building held me when I couldn't hold myself. Now, I hold it. And that feels like enough. A year passed. I didn't notice it at first. There was no big moment. Just a morning when I realized I knew every sound the building made again. Which pipes knocked, which floorboard sighed near the stairs, which window needed a firm push. The seasons moved through the rooms. In fall, leaves gathered on the steps and I swept them without thinking. In winter, the radiators hummed like old cats. In spring, the rose misses. Gable planted bloomed once, then twice. In summer, the windows stayed open and the building smelled like soap, coffee, and warm air. I finished my graphic design classes. I started taking small freelance jobs. Nothing fancy. Logos for local shops. Flyers for neighborhood events. I worked at the cafe fewer hours and slept more. Sometimes people asked if it was hard, being the landlord. I told them the truth. It's work, but it's honest. We had one flood that year. A pipe finally gave up in the middle of the night. Everyone woke up. Towels everywhere. Laughter. Somehow, in the chaos. We fixed it together by morning. No one blamed anyone. We ordered pizza and ate standing up in the hallway. Mr. Chen started teaching Maria's son chess. The young woman from the hospital moved in. She worked nights and slept days. We learned her rhythm and kept it quiet. My dad came by twice. Short visits, coffee, awkward hugs. We talked about small things. The weather, the trains. I didn't push. Neither did he. I thought about Diane less and less. When I did, it felt far away, like remembering a storm after the sky has cleared. One evening, I climbed to the roof alone. The city was loud in the distance and soft up close. I sat with my back against the brick and watched the lights come on. I realized something then. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for permission. Not for things to calm down. Not for someone else to decide what this place should be. I had already decided. I went downstairs and locked the door. The key felt solid in my hand. A year ago, I was afraid of losing my home. Now, I know what a home really is. It's the place that stays when you do. And I am staying.